So the U.S. Department of Education has just came out and essentially fired a majority of the people who work in it. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, my name is Ian Phillips, and I'm about a week away from getting my doctorate in education here, so I know what the hell I am talking about. And today, I'm going to tell you all about what this means for the country, as well as why it's probably not the best idea. And so let's take a step back real quick, and let's talk a little bit about Trump's position on the Department of Education at the federal level. Trump has been very pro-states. He says states should run things. He says that there should not be a governmental office at the federal level. He says that they're useless. And I think, his reasoning probably comes just for the sheer fact that he's corrupt and he can find a way to make more money by giving power back to the states, because his donors will like that, because they can put things like the 10 Commandments in schools, which is a violation of the First Amendment, which he doesn't care about. He doesn't care about the Bill of Rights. He doesn't care about the Constitution, right? But, outside of that, we also have the fact that the United States is doing really, 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 really bad on the world stage. Things aren't going good for us. Let's be honest. And everybody knows things aren't going good for us. Things are very bad. In fact, things are so bad that everybody and their brother always makes fun of the United States. So stupid Americans, this and that, blah, blah, blah. You go on TikTok, for 2 seconds, and you always find some, person going around to foreign countries, and they're like asking everybody like trivia questions. Everybody knows them, like geography. And then you go to the Americans, they're like, ha, silly Americans. They don't even know, where their own country is on a map, right? I mean, it's just, it's really bad, right? Things are dismal. And so, Trump comes along and he says, look, they're inefficient, they're wasting money, and they're also pushing this radical left-wing agenda that we don't want. We want to have the 10 Commandments in your schools, boy. We want to have 10 Commandments in the schools, yeehaw! Right? That's what they want. That's their agenda. And so, you got the, U.S. Department of Education in the way. And with that said, however, one of the things that you'll notice here, coming out of the Doge front, is that all government positions are not created equal. You can't just go around firing everybody, because if you go around firing everybody, then all of a sudden when they're gone, you notice that they did a lot more than you originally thought that they did. And I think the U.S. Department of Education is one of those things. I made a video, months back, maybe even over a year ago now, talking about Trump and his willingness to willfulness and his rhetoric towards abolishing the U.S. Department of Education. And does it actually matter? Well, fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter that much. If Trump were to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education tomorrow, if it were to disappear today, you're not really going to notice. To be quite frank with you, it's really not going to affect things. States have the majority of power over education, and they have for a very, very long time. It hasn't been since the No Child Left Behind Act, which, by the way, everybody acts as if it's still around. That shit's been gone for years now. And so, look, everybody likes to act like the federal government has a big role in things, but they don't. What does the federal government do? The federal government really gives you some money for like ancillary services and whatnot, some grants, some government programs, on the whole. And they can also sort of steer you in the right direction with respects to best practices and guidance, as well as filings for things like IDEA, which we'll talk about here in a second, which is why this is extremely important. But on the whole, they don't really do much. The states have complete control and autonomy over their curriculum in their state, and most of them follow what we call Common Core. It's what everybody always likes to rip on, but it's not. I don't necessarily think it's the Common Core as being an issue. I think it's a cultural issue with us doing so bloody bad in education. And so, anyways, let's cast that aside here. Why does this really matter? Right? If the U.S. Department of Education doesn't really matter, the states have majority of their control. Why does this really matter? Well, a couple things. Right. First thing is that individual school districts get about roughly 10% of their funding through the federal government. Now, that's not a lot of funding. It's not a lot, right? But when you're talking about places that are already historically underfunded, 10% goes a long effing way. And so you get rid of that 10%, that's a problem. Now, you could argue that money would be funneled in through other sources, and it probably would be. But in addition to that, we also have the government giving guidance for certain things and for certain laws and regulations and best practices that the individual school districts and states have to uphold. Now, usually there is, financial, carrots dangled in front of them. And if you don't follow this, screw you, you're not getting any money. But sometimes, too, there's also guidance with respects to things that are federal law, and they've been federal law for a very, very long time. We have the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it's extremely important. In fact, it's probably the most important law in all of education, which essentially states that everybody has to be provided with a free education. Essentially, that's essentially what it says, and you have to make some reasonable accommodations for students who suffer with disabilities. And, essentially what it says, in a nutshell, in a small nutshell, right? Again, you could expand. The bill is hundreds of pages long, probably, if not thousands, right? And it's been expanded on many, many times. I think the last time it was updated was like 2004, right? So, I mean, there's lots and lots of legal precedent there if you want to go ahead and read it. But essentially, special education students had to be provided with an education, usually in like a least restrictive environment type setting, which essentially means that these students have to be placed in the environment that's most appropriate to benefit their needs. And so they got to be, if they can stay into the general classroom, they will. If they need to be removed from the general classroom, they can't just function there and they're ruining it for everybody else. They're ruining it for themselves. They're not getting the help that they need. They got to be placed into a different environment, right? Least restrictive, right? And it ensures that everybody gets the education that they need and that they deserve, right? I mean, this is one of the richest countries in the world. I think everybody's entitled to a free education. But having said that, it is a privilege, right? And if you did lose that privilege, you can lose it. But what does this guidance office do essentially, right? Because that's what they're doing. The law is the law, right? I mean, you could say, okay, we'll get law enforcement involved. You could say, okay, we'll file a lawsuit against you in court, right? Or we'll press charges against you for like doing X, Y, or Z. So what do they do here? Well, at the federal level, they try to avoid that, right? They're trying to avoid lawsuits, being on the individual district level or at the state level in some cases. And so what do? They're going to do a lot of monitoring and compliance. They're going to do some grant management. They're going to do some data collection and reporting. That's just like national data, right, on students with disabilities, achievement gaps, graduation rates, inclusion rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of environments are they going to be in? What kind of funding is currently being done? And is that funding actually making a difference? And then we're also going to have, technical assistance, right? How to work with like certain, resource centers and how are we going to, work with certain formats for like IEPs and whatnot, policy and guidance, clarifications on IDEA as a law, explaining, how discipline applies to students with say like autism or ADHD, or how due process hearings should be conducted, things like manifestation determinations, which are essentially meetings when a student has been suspended for more than 10 days and they have a disability. It's like, well, then what do you do with them? Do you have to provide them instruction at home? Do you not have to provide them instruction at home? And then those things will be clarified inside of manifestation determination meetings. And so, you got all of that. And then, of course, you got like civil rights coordination, right? So, complaints on disability discrimination within schools, they're going to be handling some of those things. But again, it's essentially just enforcing and giving you guidance on the law. And then it's also looking at some data and reporting it back. And so, look, do you need a major staff to do that? Not necessarily. But you do need a staff to do that? Yes. And you probably should, because in the long run, it probably saves you money. I mean, again, education is severely underfunded. And so when you have a sitting duck like this, where you're like, wow, like we could, maybe get some more funding elsewhere, you're really not, right? Because if the school districts are getting sued because they're not following IDEA properly, and they probably will follow it properly, right? But, sometimes they might not, or there needs to be guidance or clarifications, or, some little nitpicking detail is not done and somebody just is sue happy. They just go around suing everybody, which is what happens in this country. Then all of a sudden you run into an issue. Now, I have personally been against a lot of the special education in this country, right? In the sense that I don't agree with the best practices and policies surrounding it. But what that doesn't mean is that I'm not for having an office as such, because they do give you a lot of great guidance and support when that support is needed. Now, do they need to be a big staff? No, probably not. And could people have been fired? I'm sure they probably could have. A lot of these people, again, like I know some of them, right? Like maybe not this level, but I know a lot of people in education, and, as much as I love them, right, they're not really doing much. You know what I'm saying? They're not really doing much. Like teachers are doing a lot of the day-to-day, principals are doing a lot of the day-to-day, general support staff, paras and whatnot are doing a lot of the day-to-day, paras, aides, they're going to do a lot. Intervention specialists will do a lot. Probably superintendents on like compliance, HR a little bit, custodians a lot. Outside of that, there's really not, I'm sure there's some other positions out there that I'm not thinking of, right? But the majority of positions, like a lot of them are just sort of fluff positions, or if you need them, you only need like a few of them. And so, the fact that still like a few high-level officials were there is not that alarming to me. But it is concern. It is a little bit concerning if they can't handle the workload, which I'm sure they probably can't, because they just go around firing anybody. They don't actually run the data analysis beforehand, right? Because what happens is they get rid of like the top performing people, and then it just ruins everything. And it's like all of a sudden like everything comes crashing down. And so this is a problem. is a problem. And it's a problem not just for the U.S. Department of Education. It's a problem for everywhere. And so it's something that we want to really take serious as we're examining whether or not DOE should continue, and if it does continue, in what capacity. And what a shame that we have to be in this situation. Ladies and gentlemen, when we have a society whereby we are arresting journalists, when we have a society where we are removing press passes from people who want to speak out against the president, when we have a society where individuals are being forced to hang the 10 Commandments in their schools as teachers, that's a problem, ladies and gentlemen. That is a problem, because what happens when it goes against what you like and what you enjoy? And all of a sudden, then it becomes an issue. But you don't realize that because the precedent, is in your favor now. But tomorrow, the tides could shift. And so with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know. I just thought I'd report the news, rant a little bit here. And one of the things I'll tell you what, that really irks me, and it irks me the most, is that the unions probably aren't going to do anything about this. When I used to be a state-level union delegate for the state of Ohio under the OEA, the Ohio Education Association, and let me tell you, they are bloody spineless individuals. Same with a lot of local unions as well, bloody spineless. I remember I'd be like saying, trying to promote like the 4-day work week and like this and that and blah, 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 blah. And like everybody looked at me like I was nuts. They're like, well, they just won't go for it. It's like, I don't care. Like if my life is made easier by working less, then we should do it, right? Why is that hard hard for some people to grasp? I don't know. Perhaps I'm in the minority though. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you did enjoy, and we'll bring some more content here soon. As I get my doctorate, we'll be coming along with more videos sooner and sooner, quicker and quicker, more often, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a fun time, and we'll talk a lot, and we're gonna learn a lot, and have some great discussions in the comments, hopefully. So we'll talk to you later, and have a wonderful night.